Hey, this is Mike Diercksen from Proactive, and you're listening to the Building Bite podcast. Tune in as we spotlight our guests, Joe Poliafico, Director of Client Experience at the Baldwin Group. Our episode today is focused on the evolution of safety to risk management. For more information on this episode and others, please check out the Building Bite at www.buildwithproactive.com.
Welcome to the Building Bite podcast, a podcast for construction contractors, owners, and insurance professionals, where you'll hear from the experts about key topics that'll help you be successful. I'm Chris Epps, a vice president with Proactive, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Mike Diercksen, our manager of marketing and business development. We welcome our guest today, Joe Poliafico. Joe is a director of client experience at the Baldwin Group, which some of our listeners may previously know as Construction Risk Partners, or CRP. Joe, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing fantastic, Chris. How about you?
Doing wonderful. Happy to have you on. Definitely got a little bit of a different, nuanced topic here we're happy to dig into. But before we jump in, Mike, how about you? How are you this afternoon?
Doing great, Chris. Happy to have Joe on the show and get this started.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, as we said before, a pleasure to have you on the show. Before we jump in, maybe you could just give us a little bit on your background and give our listeners some insights into your career path kind of leading up to your role at Baldwin Group. And I think that may help inform some of our discussion today with a little bit of that background.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on today. It's always great to talk to folks like yourself and kind of get some messages out there around risk management, safety, the construction industry, all those things. And you know, I have 30 years of experience on the contractor side. I've just recently joined the broker side about a year and a half ago. But prior to that, I was, risk management, in charge of risk management and safety for all the different contractors that I worked for. I've worked as the VP of Vice President of Risk and Safety for Flatiron Construction. I've worked for a contractor in the DC area for about 10 years called Ficina, where I oversaw risk and safety there. We did high-rise condominiums. We did self-performing concrete. So I've got this array of different experiences on the contractor side. And one of the things that I've always been able to do, because I went to school for safety and I'm a certified safety professional, is try to bring the risk management and the safety pieces together for the companies that I've worked for in the past.
That's excellent, Joe. And so, that brings us right to our topic today, which is the evolution of safety to risk management. And so, as you mentioned before, Joe, you've got some unique insight into this space, right? As a certified former safety professional now on the risk management side of things with the brokerage. In your experience, what's the correlation like between the safety team and the risk management team? And, why should we be exploring that for insureds?
Yeah, sure. Take you back to one of my first jobs that I got in construction. And, it was for a company that had a really bad experience modifier, right? And, I think there was something like over a 2. And during the interview for the position, the VP of operations came to me and said, "We don't really think you're going to be able to do much, but we need to have somebody, implement a safety program or we're going to lose our insurance," right? So that was my first indoctrination into the correlation between safety and insurance. And, I looked at it when they offered me the job, I figured I couldn't screw it up worse, right? So I took the gig. And about a week or 2 into that, the CFO came to me and he said, "Hey, you have to pick an insurance program for us." And this is back in the early 90s where programs that you put up some money, and if you didn't have any losses, you'd get some money back. They're called retro programs. I didn't know anything about a retro program. I didn't know anything about insurance. And so I scooped everything up, went to my broker, got a crash course in insurance, for a week. We picked the program, and lo and behold, after the first year, because, we were implementing a safety program, we started to see some positive effects from our mod. We started to see some positivity coming back from the carriers and cash, right? Not just positivity. So we got a rebate back after that first year. And that's where it clicked for me, where safety and insurance kind of go hand in hand. But what I was finding within the organization I was in is that the CFO usually takes care of the insurance piece, the operations piece takes care of safety, and the two don't necessarily speak the same language. So what I was able to do was try to figure out the best way to kind of bring those two things together and be able to talk operationally, but then also talk financially, right? Talk with the CFO, talk about the insurance plans and things of that nature. And that I was lucky enough early in my career to get that done in my first few years. And basically where I went after that was everywhere that I went, it was either we just need a risk manager or we just need a safety person. You know, when they would interview me and then we would talk about it, they would start to see the correlation between the two. And I was lucky enough to get some work out down the road. So it's good.
It's certainly a novel concept, right? That, hey, there's actually some interplay between those two things and finance, and it actually starts to make a lot of sense when you sort of piece that all together. But I guess given your unique path in the industry, because we don't see that migration as a career path for a lot of people, Joe. Is there something in your mind that sort of makes people from the safety team more uniquely qualified to lean in on risk management or maybe make that jump to more of a risk management professional avenue within their career?
Yeah, it is unorthodox, Chris. And when I was the VP of risk and safety for Flatiron, I would talk to risk managers, and risk managers would say, I don't know how you could deal with safety and understand and dealing with that stuff. And I would talk to safety individuals outside of the company as well. And they're like, I don't know how you would deal with risk management, deal with insurance. Like, I can't see it. But if you think about it and take a step back, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense from the fact that, as a risk manager, you're there to, try to put the company in the best position possible contractually and with insurance programs and claims and all those different things. But it's really, really hard if you're sitting in your office as a risk manager and you don't have insight of what's going on the job sites. And a lot of risk managers have great relationships with project managers, and I certainly did. But the safety folks that are out there every day, they really see what's going on those job sites. And conversely, if a risk manager doesn't know what the programming is from a safety side, how are they going to, go to the carriers and talk about those things, right? How are they going to talk about the loss prevention activities and those types of things that they're out there to basically make them a better risk? And when I would go into my negotiations with our carriers, when I was involved in risk, I had all of that information because I was overseeing safety. I knew the programming that was coming in that was going to help affect positively our loss results, right? So I could relay that to the insurance carriers and to the underwriters. And I think that was very valuable in me trying to separate myself from the rest of my competitors when it came to insurance pricing, et cetera. So, to me, it seems like it's a no-brainer, but I don't think that a lot of companies start to see that stuff. And, what I've been able to do through the course of my career with a few different folks is, if there's my safety directors were open to it, I would share a lot of this information that I would have, as a risk manager. I'd share that with them, get them interested in it. And as a matter of fact, there's two really great friends of mine that are now great friends and colleagues that are now risk managers for different construction companies that took that same path, and they oversee the same things. They oversee safety and risk, and they're very successful at doing it.
It's certainly an interesting path as you laid out there, Joe. And I know something that kind of it reminded me of last time we spoke. Yeah, you mentioned how you were able to take that safety and risk management team and kind of create a profit center based off that. Can you maybe walk us through a little bit of what that looks like?
Yeah, it's a little bit of depends on what side of the lens you're looking at. Risk managers want to, they want to show the company that they're putting programs together that are profitable. And safety folks, they like to look at that iceberg thing, right? Where they go in and say, okay, well, any lost dollars are times 7, and it seems a bit ambiguous. I don't particularly like that concept. I like to bring it together. So what I was able to do is, bring the insurance piece that has deductible levels and it has its rates and has different things. The idea from a risk management perspective is if you take a high deductible on workers' comp, let's say, and you're bidding a job, you don't give away that risk to your clients, right? You're taking on that risk, you're managing that risk. So if you have a $25,000 deductible per comp claim, and your rate is $1, you don't charge $1 for your clients. You have to build in that first dollar risk, right? So once you start to work with those numbers, what I was able to do is I knew exactly how much money we had put aside for losses on a particular job. And this may sound blasphemous, right? And trust me, I'm a safety person. I want people to go home with 10 fingers and 10 toes, but we are in construction and we are in the market to make money as contractors. And my thinking was, why should we take this high moral ground and say, well, you have to do a great safety program because it's the right thing to do and it's morally correct. All those things still matter, but why can't we put real dollars in it? Why, instead of dealing with that iceberg and these made up numbers, why not look at real numbers? Why not look at what the real cost of losses are and equate that? And what it did was it allowed my safety folks to be out there on the jobs and have a conversation with the project managers on real dollars that are going to be, coming out of the bottom line. And basically, if you think about it in no uncertain terms, if you have a really safe job, no losses, you can probably add another point to the bottom line, and everybody's happy. The company's happy. The project manager's happy, right? And now your safety people are kind of tied to the job a little bit more in a different way. They're not just going out there doing their inspections, and they get buy-in. So that when they do their job site visits or they're out there on site, they can have a conversation with the project manager around real dollars and not just these kind of made up numbers. And, if you have a lost time, it's going to impact your productivity. Of course, all that stuff still stands, but there's real dollars that you can focus on. And that's what I tried to impart with our safety people. And it's been successful where I was, everywhere.
It's amazing, Joe, just having that information, being able to disseminate it to your team, understanding loss ratios and deductible and the financial impact. It gives you the ability to actually proactively manage issues, be able to manage safety in a way that actually makes sense instead of, as you say, kind of I don't want to say pie in the sky, but the iceberg impact and, more of a theoretical approach, I guess, to, it makes it a lot more practical issue. Along those lines, I know another practical issue that's come up a lot with some of our recent guests. And most recently, we talked about this with Ken Simonson, the chief economist for AGC, talked about qualified labor shortage within the industry, which is a bit of a hot topic and actually kind of lingering topic, I think, even, since COVID started, really, and has kind of continued. But do you think the career progression that you had talked about and we discussed could help alleviate some of those concerns and drive more educated, informed safety and risk management professionals into the field if it's just a more tangible approach and quite frankly, a more defined career path so that they're not like topping out at safety guy, which seems to be, a lot, happens a lot. If you could give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll take you back a little bit, 30 years ago. When I came into the industry, I think there were there were 10. There were 10 accredited schools across the country that actually had careers in occupational safety, right? And that's not just for construction, that's for any industry. And when I got into the construction industry, my peers in safety were ex-superintendents or were ex-people from the field that either A, couldn't do the job anymore, or they were really good at it and the company needed a safety person, right? So safety was starting to become in vogue at that time. Not that there's a problem with that, but there weren't as many schools talking about it. There weren't as many schools teaching it. That's changed, right? I think that the education level of your safety folks in the field has gone through the roof, right? I mean, almost everybody has a 4-year degree and they have got a safety background and they've got the experience to go with it. So you've got higher educated individuals actually doing the work that 30 years ago, was kind of being handled by whoever could carry a pencil almost. I mean, and that's not to say that was a bad thing. I mean, it was what it was. Now there's a lot more educated people in that field. And to your point, from a career pathing standpoint, if a company has a really good safety director, a really good safety person, and I have it right now with the clients that I have right now at Baldwin. You talk to them. Do you like your safety person? Oh, I love my safety person. My safety person's the best. Well, what's next for them? Where are they going?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you take that kind of conversation and put it aside, I'll have the same conversation with clients and saying, I need a good risk manager. I don't know where to find a good risk manager. And yes, there's schools out there, for risk management, and that's great. But I don't know that construction is necessarily their first choice, right? So kind of hard to find people to fill those roles in risk management. My thought around that is, why not take your safety person, put them with your broker, whoever it might be, and have them start to learn the insurance process, right? I think it alleviates a little bit from, your CFO, because your CFO is probably handling most of that stuff, but your CFO may or may not understand what's going on out in the field. But if you take your safety person that understands all that field stuff and plug them in and teach them risk management, I think that's a great way for a good company that loves their safety person but needs a risk manager to kind of bring them along and teach them that career path. I think it's right there in front of our eyes, and it's right there for everybody to take advantage of.
I think that's the best way to look at it, Joe. It's right there. It makes so much sense. It's just not something that I think people have verbalized too often. So a great point, and hopefully something that will catch on and provide more opportunity to, like you said, everyone's favorite safety guy could become everyone's favorite risk manager as well.
Well, if you look at this space, I'm living proof that it could happen. And maybe that's just dumb luck. I don't know, but we'll see.
Well, it seems to be working. So no, Joe, but thank you so much for your time today. It's excellent conversation. One thing we like to do with the show, we like to leave our audience with 3 key takeaways. So
Yeah.
keeping in mind that primarily our audience is made up of owners, contractors, brokers, risk management professionals. What do you think those 3 takeaways should be for them today?
Yeah, it's kind of like what we talked about. I think it has to start with leaders within the organization, whether it's owners or executive teams. They've got to look at risk a little bit more holistically. And I think that when you start to take a step back and look at where risk lies in an organization, tying a field piece with the safety person and your overall risk profile with losses and claims and insurance programming, tying those together makes a lot of sense. I think if you start to look at it, and even if you don't decide to try and take your safety person and make them a risk manager or give safety to your risk manager, if you have just a risk manager, at least get them talking. They need to at least talk, and there's value there. And I will tell you, to my risk management brethren that might be listening to this, there is value in having a good conversation on a regular basis with your safety team, because you need to understand what's going on out there. So I think that would be point 2. And number 3, I think that once you start to see that synergy between risk and safety, then I think it starts to allow for you to maybe take on a little bit more risk, because you're managing the claims, you've got the right programming, you're getting good pricing if you take a little bit more risk on your deductibles, right? But don't forget to charge for first dollar risk, even if you're taking those higher deductibles. You can't just give that away. That's money out the door.
Joe, what about an action item? If our listeners were really looking to kind of make a move towards some of these solutions you're talking about, where do they start? What's step number 1?
Step number 1 is identifying people within your organization that might be able to do this, right? I think if you're looking for a risk manager, look to your safety professional, have a conversation with those folks, see if anybody's interested in learning about it, because there's got to be an interest. And I mean, I know there are safety people that I talk to that don't want anything to do with insurance, and that's fine. But I think the first stop should be talking to the people that are in play and seeing if they would be willing to take on that additional responsibility, and show them the career path. And if anybody's listening and they want to talk about it, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm sure there'll be contact information. I'd happy to go through talking to them, and that's at no risk to them, because I like talking about this stuff. So it's good.
Well, fantastic. Joe, before we let you go, we always like to hit our guests with a couple of rapid fire questions. So we got a few lined up for you. Yeah, maybe the easiest one. What keeps you up at night professionally? What's keeping you from sleeping well?
The cost of insurance overall, even though I'm now on the side of selling it, I think the cost of insurance keeps me up at night. It's always been one of those things. I always had a little bit of I still have PTSD from all of my renewals. Even if we were really good at what we did, we were lumped in with everybody else and we'd still get increases, and still trying to have those conversations internally are tough. So that still kind of keeps me up at night. Maybe that's still a little PTSD, but at the end of the day, there are options. And I think that because I don't think insurance costs have dropped anywhere less than the number 3 cost for most contractors, especially self-performing contractors, right? The cost of comp is through the roof, and those costs aren't necessarily going to go down. So it's here to stay. You just got to manage it better. You just got to have eyes open, and there are things that you can do to manage it better. There's no doubt about it.
So on the flip side of that, then, Joe, what makes you the most excited about the work you're doing at the Baldwin Group?
For years, gentlemen, I've kind of pushed off being a broker. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to touch that side of the business. But in reality, I'm having a blast. I like the camaraderie that we have here at the Baldwin Group. I like the fact that we can handle a lot of different phases of construction. And what I mean by that is, it's not just construction from the ground up or horizontal construction with roads and bridges. It's getting involved in alternative energies and oil and gas. And, that's a phase of construction that I necessarily haven't been involved in, but I am now, right? But those overriding safety and risk principles still kind of speak to every angle that I run across. And I enjoy sharing my experiences from a contractor side with my clients. And I think that's a lot more fun than just staying in one company and just trying to handle a program for one company. I get to handle a lot of different companies now and have input. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely a fun industry. It's a big little industry, right? It feels huge, but at the same time, everyone kind of knows each other, and it's great to collaborate. And definitely one of the through lines of the show is always you got to like the people you work with. You got to like your team, So it's great to build that team. And Joe, so maybe finally, where do you see insurers struggling the most when it comes to safety and risk management then, right? You've got a unique viewpoint on this, kind of seeing both sides of it, but is there something that you've seen where people are just kind of missing the mark on it?
Yeah, and I think it gets back to the language, right? There's the financial language in insurance, and then there's the operational conversations that you have from a safety perspective. And those two languages can be completely different. And I think that trying to bring those two together, and at the very least, if you've got a CFO, if your CFO and your COO aren't talking because there's where those two big risks lie, then you're not doing it right. Those two phases have to actually communicate, and actually have to share a lot of information to be effective. The financial piece needs to know exactly what's going on in the field so they can buy the right insurance. They can manage risk effectively, right? And then in the same thing on the operational side, they need to know that where that financial impact leads, because if you sit there and you're going to build your risk management programs around lost time incident rates and all these lagging indicators that are safety based, you're maybe missing the mark.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, good risk management doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It takes collaboration. It takes talking to people. It's not a paper transaction. Oh yeah, we do this. It's having those conversations, talk to the boots on the ground.
100%.
Well, Joe, this has been a great conversation. We appreciate your time. As you know, this is the Building Bite that stands for Building Insurance Technology with the Experts. So, like yourself, Joe, where's a good place to get a bite today? I know you're out in Denver. I know we've had a few bites out in Denver ourselves, but where's the number one spot for you?
So I've got two. Like, I've got the casual spot. If you're down to get a good burger and some really great onion rings, the Cherry Cricket in Cherry Creek is fantastic. But one of my new faves is Nana's Dim Sum up in the Highlands outside of Denver. You can't get a reservation unless you have 6 people, and I know the reason why, because there's always a line, and it's actually fantastic. And I think that you guys can attest, because I think that we went there, right?
Absolutely.
The soup dumplings are to die for.
Yes.
I'll end it at that.
Yeah. Highly recommended for sure. Well, Joe, thank you for taking the time out to chat with us today. If our listeners want to hook up with you afterwards and they've got questions for you, where can they find you? Email, LinkedIn, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, my email is joe.poliafico, Poliafico @baldwin.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn there as well. And you can look me up and make sure, and it'll show you that I think I've got some experience and kind of know what I'm talking about at the very least. So you can check me out there too.
Fantastic. Joe, thank you again. Appreciate the time. And hopefully Mike and I get back out to Denver. We'll go grab dinner again sometime real soon.
I'd love to. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Building Bite. This podcast has been brought to you by Proactive. Check us out on thebuildingbite.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media for all future The Building Bite news and updates. You can also find us on your favorite apps, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Amazon. If you have ideas for episode topics that we should cover on the show, or you know somebody who would be a perfect guest, let us know at connect@thebuildingbite.com.